This is the Superpower Radio Show with your hosts, Brenda Major
Mia Dawson.
we always try to give some value to caregivers of superpower kids. And of course, if you've been watching or listening to us for a while, you know that we consider folks with special needs really those people have superpowers. We know that firsthand. Mia can definitely tell you that Neo has many superpowers.
He does. Yes, he does.
So, but we also know caregivers that um, you may have questions and may not even realize the questions that you do have or that you should have about what will happen to your superpower kid when you're no longer here. Who will be there to take care of them? What are the things that you need to know? Well, we always tell you that we are not experts, we are not clinicians or diagnosticians, but we bring on some really good guests who can give you some great advice. And with us today is Gerry Kane, who is an attorney, and he's got a lot on his platform, including estate planning, trust, life care, probate, veterans benefits, but also special needs. So welcome to the Superpower Radio Show, Gerry.
Welcome, Brenda. Thank you for having me here.
So
And
why,
Mia too.
why special needs on your because you don't find that on every attorney's platform, certainly.
Yeah, so special needs planning is near and dear to my heart because my eldest daughter has special needs. And
Yeah.
so, I understand what parents who have children or loved ones with special needs have gone through between, running to IEPs and IPP and OT and PT and PPT.
Yes.
It's I understand and, I can relate to it. And, if you, I understand what you're going through, what you will go through if you haven't gone through it. And I also understand the challenges that you're trying to deal with all these things. So, trying to deal with all these things and, take care of these tasks today, very difficult to think about planning for tomorrow.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I know this may sound elementary to you, but there are people who really don't necessarily think that they need to be thinking about this. I mean, we know that there are people who don't think they should protect themselves and they're, neurotypical. So let alone folks, who are neurodiverse, there are some people who will say, well, the state's going to take care of them. But uh, have you heard that?
I have not really heard that.
Hmm.
I think the majority, most parents typically want to make sure that their children are well taken care of and provide as many resources as possible for them. And, um, there are a lot of legal and financial concerns that should be considered for the future. And if you'd like, I can go through that with you.
That
And I,
would.
I think too, I don't know if I think they also, Jerry, you can answer this for me too. I think it's so much financially taxing. You're worried about, are you going to have enough money? Because you're spending so much money on different things. And if insurance doesn't cover certain things, and my kid has to eat a completely different diet that is taxing on our budget. And so I think sometimes it may not even be, it's almost like, oh my gosh, am I going to have enough money if
Mhm.
something is to happen in the future, as opposed to um maybe not like ignoring it or anything. It's like I don't have enough as it is right now, so how I'm going to have enough later.
Mm.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that is a big concern. There are some people who, are fortunate enough to have enough resources to be able to leave behind for their kids, but for
Correct.
some, that's not in the cards for them. So what do you do in that situation? Well,
Yeah.
you purchase life insurance, and
Yes.
life insurance can
Yes.
provide a significant amount of assets for those individuals, and placed in a
Correct.
proper special needs trust can provide, the advocacy and support for the parent, and
Mm.
also make sure that there's a system that's going to work for the next 75 years after the parent's gone,
Mm.
and
Cool.
ensure, that the benefits that they're relying upon isn't lost as well.
Okay.
Okay.
I know, Mia, you've heard from parents who are wondering about these kinds of issues, like how do you go about it? What are those first steps? So Gerry, what would you advise a parent who is maybe just now hearing this and thinking, okay,
Yes.
I need to do something, but what?
What is it? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, before I answer that, it's
Hmm.
really kind of laying the framework of understanding, some of the concerns that you need to be concerned about.
Great.
Okay.
So, first of all, the things you should be thinking about is how can I provide a system and select the proper team to provide a lifetime of management and plan for ongoing caregiving needs.
Hmm.
Mm.
Second, thinking about who's going to take over that great job that mom and dad are doing, advocating for their child if they're not there for them when they're gone.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And we talked about it a little bit already. How can you ensure there's enough money left behind to provide a lifetime of care?
Right.
And in some cases, there are individuals who may need a significant amount of money, especially if they have cerebral palsy or,
Hmm.
a genetic disease that they can't really provide for themselves with activities of daily living. And they
Mm-hmm.
need, they need a lot of ongoing medical assistance.
Yeah.
Um, what happens when your child turns 18? How can you continue to make medical and financial decisions for them on their behalf? And
Mm.
how do you ensure, especially when you have a child with disabilities, often you'll find that they're just so giving and so caring that they can
Yeah.
just so
Mm-hmm.
easily be taken advantage of financially or
Yes.
Yeah.
emotionally if you're not there
Yeah.
to protect them anymore.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the groundwork of the things that you would be thinking about. And there's a lot of things in there as far as the first steps.
Hmm.
Um, so the first steps, when you're talking about planning for the future, are
Hmm.
first of all, making sure that you have the right legal structure in place. Um, so if you haven't already done it, you're going to want to make sure that you have a special needs trust in place that can ensure that if you're not there, that assets can go into a special needs trust. And that trust is designed, primarily to do a few things. It's designed to ensure that the valuable government benefits that your child is relying upon aren't lost. And
Mm-hmm.
secondarily, it's designed to provide ongoing advocacy and management. A lot of individuals can't manage assets for themselves, and so you need
Hmm.
somebody to manage them for them.
Hmm.
But I'll tell you, when I design special needs trusts, my focus is really not on the government benefits because can anybody tell me if Social Security will be here in 30 years?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Preach, preach, Jerry. Yes, that's very true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a concern, but more
Yeah.
importantly, it's really designing something that'll work for the next 75 years. And
Hmm.
Okay.
unfortunately, a lot of people who work in this area don't think about creating something that's going to last a lifetime.
Okay. Okay.
Good point. Jerry, you mentioned something about having a system that involves not only the special needs trust, but a team of caregivers.
Mhm.
What's been your experience? What advice would you give people in laying that groundwork?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Brenda. So it's better to give you an example.
Okay.
So a lot of times when people set up special needs trusts, there's got to be somebody who's going to manage that trust. And I'll
Mhm.
Okay.
find that the first person that parents think of is the sibling who happens to be a typical child.
Hmm.
First thing
Oh.
I'll tell them is say, look, I know that that child's going to get married, going to have kids, going to have their own life.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the last thing they're going to want to be doing is managing a special needs trust. Having to, deal with the day-to-day management, having to be at the beck and call of their brother or sister. So instead,
Hmm.
why don't we put them on an advisory panel? Uh,
Hmm.
and then what we do is we have a professional trustee who knows how to properly manage a special needs trust
Hmm.
so that you won't potentially lose those government benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And we put that individual on an advisory panel along with other individuals like their therapist or, anybody involved with their care, any kind of, uh, you know, um, aunt, uncle, anybody who's a relative that's involved with their care or any other professional can be
Mm-hmm.
part of that advisory panel. so that they can advise the trustee as to what are the needs of the trust of the individual with a disability, but they really don't have to deal with the day-to-day management. Also, we can have a beneficiary advocate in place that
Hmm.
can advocate on behalf of the individual. And in some cases, when somebody does need a lifetime of assistance and care, we can appoint a care manager that can oversee the care. And that care manager, may have to put together a care plan, again, providing guidance to the trustee as to what are the care needs,
Mm-hmm.
and may be required to check in on the individual on a regular basis, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly. It really depends on what their needs are and their level of care.
Hmm.
I really like that idea of having the sibling in an advisory capacity as opposed to feeling like they've got that entire load on themselves and not knowing really how to manage and not being prepared to do that. That just makes so much sense.
Yeah, definitely.
And so as you look at, comprising that team, is that something that you would say that parents need to be considering now, if even while their kid is young?
Yeah, I mean, you do want to start considering who you might want to have on that team. And actually, your child is never too young to plan to make sure you have a special needs trust in place. And there's different kinds of special needs trusts.
Hmm.
Um, so there's a trust that can go into effect after you pass away.
Mm.
Uh, and then there's what we call a living special needs trust. And the living special needs trust can come into effect now. And so you could set up that whole system within that living special needs trust. And there's additional benefits of a living special needs trust in that since it exists today, other family members can contribute to it, either gift assets into it
Mhm.
or leave assets to it when they pass away. You
Mm.
know, it can accept insurance proceeds directly into it.
Mm.
Um, and, since it's a standalone document, it can be a lot more thorough than the one inside of your revocable trust and really set up that whole system of advocacy and support. Um, and, can be well coordinated with your revocable trust plan as well.
Okay. That makes incredible sense, particularly because you may have other, relatives, grandparents, and maybe starting to talk to them now about, hey, instead of buying him these expensive shoes or, this pony or whatever, consider contributing to that trust. That makes an incredible amount of sense to me.
Or putting the money in there. Like my parents, Gerry has money put up for both my boys. I have a younger son who is neurotypical. And so I would talk to them now about, okay, taking some of the money that they have already started. They did this when they were born and have them in different, I know they have them in different areas. And so
Mhm.
maybe saying, hey, take some of that money that you guys are doing and put it over here too. So that could be an option too. So this is something that's very interesting to me because I'm going to talk about this with them, later on about this.
Yes, Mia. Yeah, that's a great idea.
Absolutely. So, what are some other steps that you would say that people would need to be looking at now and putting in place, Gerry?
Yeah, so I mean, right now, one thing I always tell parents, if you haven't already done it,
Mm-hmm.
look up a memorandum of intent. Um, Now, this is not a legal document, because it has way more information than you'd ever put into a legal document.
Hmm.
But
Mm.
I like to think of it as kind of a mother's manual or a father's manual of the things that you know about your child,
Mm.
quirks, things that somebody else would really need to know about.
Hmm.
And,
Mm.
if your child's not verbal, it could be even more important because, then really only you know their idiosyncrasies and the things that,
Mm-hmm.
I had one parent who had a child who had Down syndrome
Mm-hmm.
and nonverbal. Um, and at a young age, she was telling me how he would have these outbursts,
Mm-hmm.
and she could never figure out what was going on. Finally figured out that it was indigestion and acid. And
Uh,
so her solution was every time this happens, he hands her a Coke. She hands him a Coke. So
Ah,
nobody else would know about that if she didn't put that
right.
in writing.
ah,
Yeah.
oh.
And in there, you're going to put all kinds of things about what's important to you, where they live,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's on their own, with assistance, a group home, how they live, what kind of religion's important to you,
Mm-hmm.
what family members you'd like to remain, as part of their care, as part of their lifetime. It's a very thorough document, and it can be, anywhere from 2 or 3 pages long to 15 pages long. Um, and if you can't find a form online, feel free to send me an email and I'll send you the form, one of the forms we have as well.
Okay.
Send that to support, SUPPORT at estplan.com, and we'll be happy to get you a form.
Mhm.
And I often record this too and create, a kind of a legacy video, My Special Child.
Mm.
So you can actually put it in a video as well, explaining all
Mm.
these different things about your child and your loved one. And, we affectionately call it My Special Child or Our Special Child.
Yeah. Okay. That is perfect. Um, now, for people who are just now hearing this and maybe feeling a little overwhelmed, I love that you're taking it step by step. Uh,
Mhm.
by developing that system, the team, the memorandum of intent, and the way that you broke it down, it's really making it, I think, a lot easier for people to grasp. And that's something that I would guess that many parents already have probably started writing down the special idiosyncrasies and needs of their kids. So,
Yeah, sometimes, but a lot of times we find people just don't put it in writing.
okay, okay.
So, Jerry, what about the people that don't feel like they have a team or don't feel like I talk to a lot of parents that they feel like they're out here by themselves. And so, or you have a single mom. We have a lot of, I talked to a lot of single moms. So who would they entrust or how would they build their team if they don't really have like who they feel that they can trust? Aunt, uncles, grandparents. What do you recommend for that?
Well, as I mentioned, there can be professionals on that advisory panel as well.
Okay.
Anybody involved with overseeing their care, their
Okay.
therapist, speech therapist,
Okay.
occupational therapist, psychiatrist, anybody who would willing to be a part of that advisory panel because
Okay.
they know your child very well and
Right.
can provide guidance to the trustee a lot easier than, them trying to really get familiar with your child and learn what their needs are.
Okay.
Okay, that makes sense. Now for people who really aren't familiar, just even with the concept of a trust, can you just give us a little bit of information about what a trust is and how it works?
That's good. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Um, so the typical trust that people set up for probate avoidance is called a revocable trust. And, I like to think of it as just kind of like a open box that you put all your assets in, your house, your cars, your jewelry,
Mm.
investments, life
Mm.
insurance, everything can go into that open box. So, assets can come in, assets can come out. There's nothing that's written in stone inside of that box. So you could draw it today and you could tear it up tomorrow. Even the IRS ignores it completely.
Hmm.
There's some individuals involved with it. The person who sets it up, trust maker or grantor, the person who's managing it, we call a trustee, but it's just a word for manager, and the person who's acting as the beneficiary, who's currently the beneficiary.
Mhm.
So when
Mm.
parents set up the typical trust, they're in all three roles. They're managing their own trusts. And, it says if one trustee can't act, the other parent can act. And then
Mm.
when none of the trustees are available, then the successor manager takes over and they get to take over without any court. And, that's one of the big benefits of it is there's no court involved if you either
Mm.
lose capacity or if you pass away, which cuts down a significant amount in legal costs, because
Mhm.
probate, I'm sure many of you
Mm.
have heard that term. Probate is
Yes.
very expensive, can be very
Yeah.
time consuming.
Yep.
The assets can be tied up in the court for months or years. Uh,
Hmm.
and, very can cost 3 to 8% of the estate's value.
Mhm.
With a trust, there's no court involved if you either lose capacity, sometimes what we call living probate, or if you pass away. And so that's the huge benefit of a trust is that it allows management and control of all of your assets, both during your lifetime as well as after you pass away.
Okay. That
Okay.
that helps, I'm sure, because we talk with people who say, "Well, I have a will. Do I
Yep.
also trust?"
Yep.
And my family went through that. My dad had a will, then Jerry, he was changing his will every week as he was about to die. He was putting people
Wow.
in, taking people out, um, and did not have a trust. And so, yeah, his house in Florida went into probate, and it took approximately 3 years and about $8,000 for
Mm.
us
Wow. Yeah.
finally.
I
Yeah.
hope he wasn't
Wow.
trying to change his trust on his own. Don't ever do that.
Yeah.
Actually, I'll
Mm.
tell you a story.
Yeah.
We had a famous writer of a comedy show. If I mentioned the comedy show, you would know the writer, so I won't mention that.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
And after he passed away, we were representing him, and he had made all kinds of handwritten notes and changes and cross-outs and write-ins on his trust, which you never ever want to do that.
He
Oh,
did that
Was
on his
the
trust. Wow.
Yeah, it was the biggest
wow.
mess you've ever seen. Don't ever
Oh.
try to amend your trust because trying to sort out what your intent was, a lot of times it's going to end up in court when you create so many ambiguities that people can't figure it out. And one
Mhm.
person says, well,
Oh. Mm-hmm.
I'm entitled to this, but
Yep.
it's, you know, so definitely don't do that.
Yep.
Yeah, that situation went on for years before we figured it out.
Wow.
Wow. Wow.
So it sounds like from what we're hearing that really families should really be starting to do this now, eh,
Yeah, well,
no matter what age
definitely.
their child is. Um, you know,
Well, anybody listening to this who's over 18 should definitely start planning now.
okay,
Mm. Okay.
okay. Because we know that life happens. And, you know, we know people who don't even want to consider writing their will because it seems like it's a death sentence.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
as young parents, you don't think that you're ever going to leave your child, at least until your child is old and gray, like you're old and gray. But because
Right.
life does happen, it's definitely something that people need to be thinking about and talking about. And Jerry, I know the laws are different in different states regarding trusts, but just in general, if somebody's listening to this now and says, "Okay, tomorrow I need to get on this," um, aside from making sure they have that team in place, what's the most practical thing they can do to actually get the ball rolling?
Yeah, so if you're talking about getting a plan in place for
Yeah.
themselves, it doesn't really matter what state you're in because, I have a network of attorneys that I can work with. And so I'm working with individuals in other states to help them.
Mm.
And a lot of special needs trust is really based on federal law. So it doesn't
Okay.
really change a whole lot from state to state. Uh,
Oh.
yeah, so we can definitely help you with that regardless of where you're at. Make sure that you've got the proper plan in place. Now, one of the things you didn't ask is, what happens when your child turns 18?
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so for that, you may want to consider going into court because you may not find yourself being able to make medical decisions for that child or financial
Oh.
decisions on behalf of that child because once you're 18, you're considered an adult and you get to make your own financial and legal decisions and medical decisions. So, usually before 18, if that child doesn't have enough ability to do those things on their own, you're going to want to start the process. For that, you will want to talk with a local attorney because most likely they're going to have to go into court in order to get that in place. And we
Hmm.
call that an adult guardianship in many states. Certain states call it something different, like California, we call it a limited conservatorship.
Okay.
So it really just depends on the state you're in and what they call it and what the rules and processes are.
Okay. That is good to know. So even an individual with a special needs, if they when they turn 18, they're still considered an adult?
That is correct. Yeah, you're presumed to be competent. And, if as an aside, typically in order to take away somebody's rights to make their own decisions,
Hmm.
uh, if they have enough capacity and they want to argue about it, they're entitled to a jury trial before somebody takes away their rights in most cases.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is great to know. So, do you recommend that people, now that if they've got a system in place, they've got a team in place, is this the time when they would then consult with an attorney?
Well, you don't have to know exactly who that team's going to be in advance. Like I
Okay.
mentioned, you want
Okay.
to
Okay.
start getting all these things in place as soon as possible. Don't wait. Like you mentioned, life happens, and you want to make sure that you have peace of mind,
Hmm.
knowing there'll be a system in place no matter what happens. So definitely it's something you don't want to procrastinate on one day more. You want to start this process as soon as possible.
Okay, great. Then Gerry, I noticed that on your website, you've actually got a section that really does lay out it's a special needs plan. I was looking at it earlier today. So how can people access that?
Yeah, you're welcome to go to the website. It's at www.estplan.com. And, on there is a guide on special needs planning and a little bit more information. You're welcome to download that guide, and you can get that free information from there.
Awesome. Now you said that you work with attorneys all over the country. So
Uh-huh.
if there are people who have specific questions and they want to ask you, how would they reach you?
Sure. Yeah, people can reach me. I like to be a personal resource to people, so they can always text me on my cell phone at 818-405-8055 if you have any questions. Don't call there. That's for texting.
Hmm.
Uh, you can call our office at 818-905-6088 to get on our calendar, or send a text saying, I'd like to get on your calendar. Because of, you listening to us on this radio show, and because Brenda and me are good friends of mine, we're going to offer you the ability to sit down with me for a free 30-minute consultation.
That's
Oh,
awesome.
Charge.
cool. That's so
So
cool.
anybody has any questions, feel free to set that up and we'll be happy to sit down with you, take a look at, what kind of planning needs you have and recommend to you what we should get started right away.
Oh, that is awesome. And
So
perfect way
awesome.
to end the show because we are out of time. I know you have more questions and we're going to have you back, Gerry. This has been tremendous. And I know some people are probably just breathing a sigh of relief. Thank you for offering that 30-minute free
Oh,
consultation.
you're very welcome. Yeah, there's
That
a
is
lot of topics we didn't touch on, like able accounts and things like
yeah.
that we definitely.
Definitely will have to have you back on very soon. So we'll be getting on your calendar so we can schedule that next appointment with you. So you've been listening to the Superpower Radio Show with your host, Brenda Major,
Mia Dawson.
and our very special guest, Gerry Kane. And we will be back with you very soon.
Bye bye, guys.